If you've ever found yourself saying, that didn't feel right, but I didn't want to seem rude, this is for you. I once had a colleague, let's call him Mark. Charming, articulate, full of ideas, and full of something else too, lies. But here's the kicker, I didn't realize it at first. Not because he was good at lying, but because I wanted to believe him. The hardest part about deceit isn't spotting it. It's admitting to ourselves that someone we trusted is being dishonest. I want to tell you a story I'm not proud of. A few years ago, I had someone in my life, someone I cared about, admired even, lie to me repeatedly. Not big, scandalous, headline-making lies. No. These were the subtle ones, the ones wrapped in charm and warmth, the ones that made you feel like you were the problem for even questioning them. I remember one evening sitting across from him at a restaurant, and he looked me in the eye and said, "Why would I lie about that?" I remember freezing, because in that moment, my gut screamed that something was off. But instead of speaking up, I laughed nervously, took another bite of my food, and said, "Yeah, you're right." I swallowed my instinct like it was dessert. Why? Because I didn't want to ruin the moment. I didn't want to seem dramatic or suspicious. I didn't want to be that person. But let me tell you what I really didn't want: the truth. Because if I accepted that he was lying, then I had to accept that I'd placed my trust in the wrong hands. I had to accept that maybe I'd been ignoring signs all along, and that is painful. That kind of reckoning doesn't just call into question another person's character, it calls into question our own judgment. So I chose temporary comfort over long-term clarity. And it cost me. It cost me peace, it cost me trust, it cost me a version of myself that believed in my own intuition. That experience taught me something I want to offer to you. Lies aren't always loud. Sometimes they wear a smile. Sometimes they hold your hand. Sometimes they come in the form of a question that makes you feel guilty for even wondering. We don't talk about this enough. The emotional toll of realizing someone is lying to us, not because we're naive, but because we're human, because we want to believe the best in people, because we were taught that giving the benefit of the doubt is noble, and because calling out dishonesty can feel like tearing down a house we've built with hope. But here's the truth. Ignoring the truth doesn't protect us. It erodes us. It chips away at our sense of safety, our sense of self, our ability to trust not just others, but ourselves. So I'm not here today to tell you how to spot liars like a detective. I'm here to invite you back to yourself, to that little voice inside that whispers something doesn't feel right, the one we've trained ourselves to ignore. That voice is wise. It's not mean. It's not overreacting. It's not rude. It's protective. Let's stop labeling self-protection as cynicism. Let's stop confusing politeness with powerlessness. Because real trust requires truth. And sometimes telling ourselves the truth is the most courageous thing we can do. Now, before we go any further, I want to pause and say something really important. When we talk about liars, it's easy, almost automatic, to think in black and white. Good people versus bad people, truth tellers versus deceivers, the honest versus the manipulators. And let's be honest, it feels good to land on the moral high ground. It feels good to believe we're on the right side. But here's the thing I've learned over and over again, usually the hard way. Human beings are rarely all one thing. People lie. Sometimes they lie to protect themselves, sometimes they lie to gain something, and sometimes this part is hard to admit. They lie because they're deeply afraid that the truth will make them unlovable, rejected, or exposed. And before we get too comfortable distancing ourselves from those people, I want to ask you this. Have you ever told someone you were fine when you absolutely weren't? Have you ever said, I didn't mean it like that, when deep down you know you did? Have you ever withheld the truth because you couldn't bear the disappointment in someone's eyes? I have, and I'm guessing you have too. Not because we're bad people, but because we're wired for connection. And sometimes when connection feels threatened, we reach for control. And lying, whether through words, silence, or evasion, is a way of trying to stay safe. Now, that doesn't mean we excuse the lies, it doesn't mean we ignore the harm, but it does mean that if we want to grow, if we want to really understand the people around us and protect ourselves in ways that are healthy, we have to be willing to look at dishonesty not just as a moral failure, but as a coping mechanism. That shift doesn't make us weaker, it makes us wiser. Because judgment creates walls, curiosity creates insight. Let's be clear, boundaries are still necessary. If someone repeatedly lies to you, manipulates your reality, or violates your trust, you don't need to fix them. You don't need to make excuses for them. And you definitely don't need to stay close to them. But you also don't need to make them the villain in your story just to justify walking away. You can choose peace without creating enemies. You can say this doesn't work for me without needing to label someone as toxic or broken. You can leave the door closed and still leave the light on in your heart for the belief that people can change, including you. Here's what I've found. The moment I stop needing to decide whether someone is a liar or a good person, I free myself. I shift my energy from trying to decode them to honoring me. I stop asking what's wrong with them and start asking what's true for me right now. That's power. That's where healing begins, not in making someone wrong, but in making yourself whole again. So today isn't about hunting for liars. It's about noticing how certain questions, behaviors, or patterns feel in your body. It's about becoming fluent in the language of your own nervous system. It's about walking away from conversations and asking, did I feel safe in that? Instead of, did I say the right thing? And it's about realizing that trust isn't a declaration, it's a practice, a daily decision to align your words, actions, and values, and to expect the same from the people you invite into your heart. Because the real goal isn't to avoid ever being lied to again, it's to be so anchored in your truth that no lie can unseat your peace. Emotional intelligence isn't just about managing emotions, it's about understanding what they're trying to tell us. I mean, here's the truth. One of the most emotionally intelligent things we can do is acknowledge discomfort instead of ignoring it. And someone lies to us, whether it's a little white lie or a full-blown betrayal, the wound isn't just cognitive. It's not just about facts being wrong. It's emotional. It touches something deeper. Our sense of reality, our sense of safety, our sense of belonging. That's why we often freeze. That's why we sometimes stay silent. That's why we second guess ourselves hours, even years later, because dishonesty doesn't just bend the truth, it bends our connection to ourselves. And if we don't recognize that, we end up navigating relationships like a minefield, watching for danger, but blaming ourselves for feeling it. Emotional intelligence says, let's stop doing that. Let's name the tension. Let's honor the gut feelings. Let's understand that when we feel uneasy, it's not always paranoia. It could be the nervous system picking up on something we haven't consciously processed yet. And let's also go deeper. Why do people lie? This is where emotional intelligence really stretches us, because we're asked not just to see behavior, but to see pain behind the behavior. Most chronic liars, they're not trying to hurt you on purpose. They're trying to protect something, usually their own image, shame, or fear of disconnection. They're terrified that if you knew the truth, you wouldn't choose them. So they curate, they spin, they perform. Does that excuse the behavior? Absolutely not. But it gives context to it. And context is what keeps us from getting bitter. It helps us understand the pain without having to carry it. So here's a shift. Instead of asking, why are they like this? We ask, what pain might they be managing in the only way they know how? That question doesn't require you to stay in a relationship with them, but it does allow you to leave with clarity instead of resentment. And there's one more piece that emotional intelligence demands: self-reflection. Have I ever created a space where someone felt they couldn't be honest with me? Have I ever reacted so harshly to someone's truth that they felt safer lying? Have I ever betrayed my own integrity to keep the peace? These are not easy questions, but emotionally intelligent people ask them, not to blame themselves, but to stay awake, to stay grounded, to stay honest. Because emotional intelligence isn't about being soft. It's about being strong and emotionally aware. It's about holding boundaries without building walls. It's about saying, I won't tolerate this behavior without needing to scream, you're a horrible person. It's the calm voice in the storm that says, I see what's happening, I feel the impact, and I choose how I move forward, not based on fear, not based on ego, but based on truth. Emotional intelligence is the bridge between protecting our hearts and keeping them open. It allows us to grieve dishonesty without becoming cynical, to walk away without closing off, to believe in goodness without becoming blind to reality. It lets us say, I love you and I don't trust you right now. I see you're hurt and I still need distance. I understand why you lied and I won't allow it again. That's the real work. And it's hard, but it's the kind of hard that builds resilience, not regret. So today, we practice not just spotting the red flags, but understanding what they mean, where they come from, and how we respond in a way that reflects not just what we've survived, but who we've become because of it. The quiet, steady belief that you can count on yourself. I don't know about you, but every time I've been lied to, deceived, or manipulated, the real heartbreak didn't come from them breaking my trust. It came from the inner whisper. Why didn't I listen to myself? That's what stings. It's not just about being hurt. It's about realizing you overrode your own wisdom to make someone else comfortable. It's about all the times you noticed something felt off, and instead of honoring that, you told yourself you were overthinking, too sensitive, or just tired. But that's not failure, that's survival. Right? We've been trained, especially those of us who are raised to be peacemakers, fixers, or caretakers, to minimize our discomfort to keep the harmony. But self-trust asks a different question. Can you stay with yourself even when it gets uncomfortable. Let me say this clearly. You are not crazy for sensing when something feels wrong. You are not dramatic for naming it. You are not rude for stepping away from people who twist your reality. That voice inside of you, the one that whispers, "This doesn't feel right," the one that clenches your stomach, tenses your shoulders, makes your heart beat a little faster, that voice isn't paranoia. That's your body remembering what your mind hasn't yet caught up to. Self-trust is about learning to listen to that voice again and again and again. Even when it's inconvenient, even when people don't like it, even when it means disappointing others, to be honest with yourself. That kind of trust doesn't happen overnight. It gets rebuilt moment by moment, decision by decision. Every time you say, "No, I don't like how that felt," you reinforce it. Every time you pause before answering a question that feels manipulative, you reinforce it. Every time you walk away from something that looks shiny but feels off, you reinforce it. Self-trust is the most powerful form of protection we have. Not because it prevents pain, but because it teaches us that no matter what happens, we'll have our own back. But here's the part no one tells you. Rebuilding self-trust often comes with grief. Grief for the version of you who didn't know better. Grief for the times you silenced yourself to stay loved. Grief for the red flags you painted white because you were desperate to keep the peace. And I want to say something radical here. You don't have to shame that version of you. You don't have to hate her or him or them. You get to say you did what you could with what you knew. Thank you. I'll take it from here. That's what reclaiming self-trust looks like. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about feeling the shaky yes in your bones and still saying no with your voice. It's about making a different choice today, not because you finally figured it all out, but because you're done abandoning yourself in the name of being liked, accepted, or easy to be around. Let me tell you what happens when you truly begin to trust yourself. You become harder to manipulate, not colder, just clearer. Not bitter, just boundaried. Not closed, just careful with who gets access to your tenderness. Self-trust doesn't mean you'll never be lied to again. It means the next time it happens, you'll see it faster. And more importantly, you'll believe yourself when you do. You won't need 10 red flags to give yourself permission to walk away. You'll recognize one and say, "That's enough." Because your peace, your clarity, and your inner voice are not negotiable. So if you're sitting there thinking, "I've ignored my gut so many times, I don't even know what it sounds like anymore," don't panic. That voice, she's not gone. She's just waiting for you to come back. And you will. Not perfectly, not quickly, but powerfully. And when you do, you'll realize that the person you were waiting to save you was always you. Not just the words we use, but how we use them. Because there comes a moment in every healing journey when silence becomes too heavy, too expensive, too self-erasing. And that's the moment we have to speak. But not all speech is created equal. There's the kind of speech that wounds, sharp, reactive, dripping with blame. And then there's the kind that frees, the kind that sets boundaries without burning bridges, the kind that says, "This is my truth," without making someone else wrong for not living in it. That's what we're reaching for today. Language that is direct but compassionate. Clear, not cruel. Firm, not forceful. Rooted in self-respect, not self-righteousness. Here's why it matters. When you've been lied to, especially more than once, your nervous system starts storing up receipts. It's like your whole body says, never again. And suddenly you're rehearsing confrontations in the shower or crafting imaginary monologues in your head that end with, and that's why you're blocked. Listen, I get it. Anger is part of the healing process. It can be righteous, holy, necessary. But if we speak from anger instead of through it, we risk losing our power. We come off as unpredictable instead of unshakable. So what do we do instead? We learn to name our truth directly, honestly, compassionately, in real time. That doesn't mean sugarcoating. It means anchoring. Let me give you an example. Let's say someone asked you one of those manipulative questions like, why would I lie to you? Are you seriously doubting me right now? Wow, you don't trust me at all, do you? You don't have to fall into the trap of defending yourself. You don't have to answer the question they asked. You can stay grounded and say, that kind of question makes me feel like you're trying to shift the focus away from what I'm actually feeling. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to have an honest conversation. Or I'm noticing that you're making this about my reaction instead of the actual behavior. That's not okay with me. Or even just, I'm not comfortable with where this conversation is going. Let's pause. That's direct. And that's love. Because love is not passive. Love does not pretend. Love does not lie to keep the peace. Compassionate language isn't soft, it's intentional. It recognizes that truth can be disruptive and still kind. It recognizes that you can protect your peace without punishing the other person. Sometimes the most compassionate thing we can say is, this doesn't feel good to me, and I need to step back. Not to punish, not to guilt, not to manipulate, but because we've learned, sometimes the hard way, that our inner safety is not up for negotiation. Here's what I know to be true. People will test your boundaries more than once. They'll push against your clarity with confusion. They'll try to turn your calm no into a maybe and your maybe into a yes. And in those moments, you get to respond not with drama, not with cruelty, but with self-honoring language. You don't need to yell. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to convince them to understand. You can simply say, I've thought about it and this doesn't feel right for me. I respect you, but I also respect myself. And this isn't working. I need to make choices that protect my peace. This is one of them. Clear, grounded, kind. That's what direct and compassionate language sounds like. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the truest. It's not about winning the argument. It's about not losing yourself in it. And when you practice this kind of language, not just once, but daily, something profound happens. You stop being afraid of confrontation because you realize you're not here to fight. You're here to stand in your truth, and that is enough. You start to trust your voice, your tone, your presence. You stop needing validation to speak. You stop seeking permission to feel. And one day happens, you become magnetic. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. To speak the truth. Speak it plainly. Speak it lovingly. And speak it even if your voice shakes. That's not weakness. That's what integrity sounds like out loud.